The moot, the science of the séance. Got some slides. So we're going to start with the etymology of the word séance. And etymology is the study of the origins of words and the original definition. So if you look at the word séance, it comes from the French, right? It basically means to sit down. So from 1789, it became a sitting, a session, as of a learned society. Originally in French content from French séance, a sitting, from seor, to sit, from Latin sedere, to sit, from Proto-Indo-European root, to sit, meaning spiritualistic session in which intercourse is alleged to be held with ghosts of the dead, is from 1845. So what we are doing here is a séance, because we are sitting and we're talking. First slide, bear with me. Now we have skeptic, just a couple of terms. So some of the things we're going to go into, some people might be skeptical. Now, again, the etymology of the word skeptic. The original etymology of the word skeptic is to reflect, look and view, and to delve into. It's not so much to be opposed or doused. When most people think skeptic, I'm going to doubt that knowledge. But if you're really skeptical, you want to look into it and research it. There's a quote here. So it comes from the Proto-Indo-European root, spec, to observe. There's a quote here: skeptic does not mean him who doubts, but him who investigates or researches, as opposed to him who asserts and thinks that he has found. So if you already, I'm the same. Like I invite all of you to kind of, because I don't know it all and I've only got a few slides. So everybody, please be skeptical, but don't doubt it, right? So, and then we've got one more word, heretic. So heretic comes from the Greek word heretikos, which just means able to choose. That's all it means. So when they say you're a heretic, they mean you're able to choose. You don't want to choose the Bible, you don't want to choose the Quran, you're able to choose, you're a heretic. It literally just means Greek word heretikos, able to choose. So they're the first three slides of the etymology of some words. Now I'm just going to briefly start. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah? Right, I'm good.
Put it on pause. Welcome to the science of the séance. We're having a séance right now, but you need to sit down because séance means sit down.
I'm sorry for interfering.
It's fine.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So you missed, just briefly recap. It's called the science of the séance, but the word séance in French just means to sit down. And then we talked about the word skeptic. The etymology of skeptic is just to delve into, to research. It doesn't mean really to doubt. And then the word heretic is Greek. From the Greek, heretikos means able to choose. So somebody calls you a heretic, it just means, you're able to choose. And that's it. So that's all you've missed. Right, thank you. And then just briefly touch upon, so this is the science of the séance, when I'm going to talk about the link between science and the paranormal. So it's not so much that science is going to disprove or block out the paranormal. So, there's parts of science which actually interacts with, and there's a crossover. So there's the normal, which is what we consider normal, and then the paranormal, which is beyond normal. Para meaning beyond. So now we talk about sound waves, or waves in general. So sound waves are mechanical oscillations, so different to electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic waves, such as light, a radio frequency, they are not mechanical waves, but electromagnetic waves, right, are waves of energy that travel through space consisting of oscillating electrical and magnetic fields. But sound waves are physically vibrating every atom. Right, so this is important. If you look into sound waves, they are able to permeate every type of medium except an absolute vacuum. So the definition of an absolute vacuum is nothing. So therefore, sound can permeate everything. And bear in mind it's mechanical. So as we're speaking, as you hear music, it's a bit of a miracle that your body doesn't disintegrate, because every particle in your body is actually oscillating to that frequency, but we don't disintegrate. Getting onto sympathetic resonance, if you match the resonance of wood, you can disintegrate wood with sound. Digress a bit, but it's just getting into the idea that sound can permeate all mediums, and that we are all mediums for sound, we are all mediums for light. And I say the definition of an absolute vacuum is nothing, therefore sound can permeate everything. We have the electromagnetic spectrum, so that's not sound waves, but light waves, radio waves. So from low frequencies, red, up to high frequencies, violet, ultraviolet. I'm just going to touch upon now, so the science of the séance. So we've touched on to the paranormal now. So when we're doing spells or Christian hymns, mantras, there's a key that there's rhyme, rhythm, and tone. So, we have like Om Namah Narayana, but then you may have a Christian hymn, Dominus. The proper way of praying, the Latin chants, that is the proper way of doing it. It's all good saying a prayer or an invocation when you use normal tones, but if you want to do it scientifically, use tone. I know it sounds silly, but by having tone, frequency, and patterns, what we're doing essentially is creating patterns amongst the noise. Now, if we have a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, we look at SETI, S-E-T-I, they are looking for patterns in radio waves. When we see patterns in radio waves, that denotes intelligence. So amongst the noise of background cosmic radiation emissions, we find some patterns. Oh, there's intelligent life there. So if we look at the spiritual realm, if the spiritual realm has all of this noise, and then all of a sudden it can hear or sense some patterns, such as somebody praying in tones or doing a spell which rhymes, so hence we rhyme the spells, we do a mantra with rhyme and rhythm, that creates a pattern in space and time, right? And don't forget, that permeates all, that's just sound, so just having the vocals of the mantra or the spell, or the, if you Gregorian Christian chant, if you want to do Latin chants, or, that's the same effect. So just touch upon that. So the science of the science there is sound creating patterns in space-time to denote this is intelligence. So things we can sense it. We can sense it amongst the noise, because there is a lot of background noise. If you tune into different radios, between the radio stations, what do you hear? Then you hear radio. Oh, welcome to radio. That's patterns amongst the noise, and that's the same that applies here. And then we get into different mediums. We are all mediums, humans. We hear up to about 22 kilohertz, whereas a cat can hear up to 64 kilohertz. A dog can hear up to 45 kilohertz. Now you think, well, why did witches know to have cats? Witches, as much as dogs were available, and wolves, no, we want the cats. And this is going back thousands of years. So we know this scientifically now, that cats can hear up to 64 kilohertz, dogs can hear up to about 45 kilohertz, we can hear about 22 kilohertz. So they must have known back then that, the cats are a really good medium to sense these sound waves which we can't hear. So that's another part of how this science of sound waves bridges over to the paranormal. So there's a good analogy that some people say that cats can be CCTV for the spiritual realm, because not only can they hear higher frequencies, but they can see higher frequencies. And what I don't have on this slide, there's an experiment in the 1990s by Yang Dan et al. Where they wet wired a cat's brain to a computer using wires, and they could see through the cat's eyes. So there's actually scientists doing ghastly experiments on cats to see what the cat can see. Don't know why, but they done it in the 90s. So what's going on now, I don't know. But we know that cats are very good mediums, and it makes sense that witches had cats, which are at a higher frequency than dogs, and the witches don't have. Dogs are good companion animals, don't get me wrong. Dogs can smell. Dogs can smell cancer. Dogs can be a good companion and survival animal. But if you want a medium with a higher frequency, just scientifically speaking, cats. Hence, witches have cats. So that's that slide. Yeah. The next is, it's a bit, I'll turn it this way, is, so we get into frequencies. Now, talking about waves, talking about sine waves, but wave physics applies to basically all waves, even the ocean waves. So when I'm talking about, we get these are harmonics and overtones. So we get the fundamental wave, which is, let's say, 10 hertz. Then you have the first harmonic, the second harmonic, which is like an octave, so it's double of that. Then you have a third, a fifth, etc. Now, I've added this here. Fun fact: when we have music these days, we have what's called equal temperament music, equal temperament scale. So we've got 12 notes of the keyboard, but to have those 12 notes, we had to sacrifice perfect tuning. If we go back to the ancient world, such as Pythagorean pentatonic, they actually had perfect fifths, which we don't have anymore. So when we hear C major in modern music or C minor, it's an imperfect harmony. Now there's a bit of a give and take here, because if we have perfect fifths and thirds, we can't have as much freedom of expression with the notes. We only have 5 notes on the lute or whatever. So we've sacrificed musical expression for perfect harmony. So I'll put here, perfect tuning is not used in modern 12-tone equal temperaments. It is imperfect tuning. Some ancient tuning used perfect intervals, but had less notes and some expressive constraints. And then you have a thing called the Pythagorean comma. Because you're using perfect harmony, when you get to making different chords, then you're going to get these dissonant notes, right? So the Pythagorean tuning is a system of musical tuning in which the frequency ratios of all intervals are based on the ratio 3:2. This ratio, also known as the pure, perfect fifth, right? The ancient Sumerians or Mesopotamians are also tuning their instruments to that. We've been developing different theories for music, and now this relates to everything, because these wavelengths are not just musical wavelengths, but they are geometric wavelengths, etc. They apply to all waves. To have that wave in harmony with this harmonic, with the third harmonic, that's mathematics. So But to hear it in music is a good way of describing it. If we hear a pure perfect fifth, that sounds different to when it's dissonance. So now we get into room modes. So this is in every room, right? Most people won't know this. There's what's known as a standing wave, a room mode. So if we divide, should be an equation here. Yeah. So if we divide the speed of sound in air in meters by the width, right, we get a standing wave room mode. So basically, depending on the dimension of the room, a certain frequency wave will be amplified by the room itself. And because we've got width, length, and height, there's 3 potential standing waves which are going to interact. Not so sure about the dimensions of this room, but what I'm postulating here, which is just general fact, is that if we look at certain cathedrals, and especially Greek temples, they were built to the golden ratio. They made sure that when they built the temple or cathedral, that they're using specific proportions which were derived from the golden ratio. That's similar to using perfect fifths in music. So we have the musical sine waves, and then we have it in geometry. So the same expression of the perfect fifths, we would have, we're going to use the golden ratio to make this Greek temple. The Greeks were also using it. So if we do that, then when we are doing, let's say, a mantra, the room itself is going to amplify those frequencies, and it's going to resonate back and forth. It's going to start it's going to feed back. So if you put a microphone to a speaker, the sound records itself and then amplifies over it, and it just goes beep because it's feedbacking. So if you have a room that is made by X, Y, and Z, let's say the golden ratio, and you intone that tone, it's going to have potentially, over and over feedback to amplify that tone with the room itself and with yourself. So that's given, I've just said a minute here, by using sacred geometry, golden ratios in room design, X, Y, Z dimensions, we can have harmony in the standing waves of the room. So this is actually, you learn this in wave physics and studio design. So if you're designing a studio for music recording and music production, what they do is they try to remove these things. So this is where you learn, hang on, they're trying to, if you're designing a studio for music production, you're recording or vocalist, they put helmholtz resonators in the room and say, we don't want to have these standing waves, we want to remove them. But if we're getting spiritual work and you're doing mantras, such as the Greek temples, you want to amplify those waves. So that's a link where we've got the wave physics of sound linking to geometry, right? Say Greek temples. Then we have constructive interference and destructive interference, which is, if you have a frequency and you intone that, it's going to amplify. If you have the wave offset, it's going to nullify. And again, it's the same with waves in motion. All of the waves, whether it's electromagnetic waves, sound waves, is wave physics. They all apply. And that's just a brief equation of how to work out the room mode or the standing wave of a room, which is the speed of sound in air divided by the length, width, or height, meters. And again, this is where it gets interesting. Sound can travel at different speeds depending on medium, just like light. So the speed of sound in air we generally use for these equations, which is generally constant. When we say the speed of sound, what we really mean is the speed of sound in air, and we use that. That's that one. There we go. And we talk quickly about Helmholtz resonators. So again, going back to studio design, which you learn in studios, we try to remove these waves by using Helmholtz resonators. So when you've got echo in the room, what you generally do to remove these in a studio is you'd make a cavity in the wall, right? You'd make a cavity, you'd make it a certain dimension for the wavelength. So when somebody's singing or somebody's playing and you want to record that, the wave gets trapped in the Helmholtz resonator, oscillates within the cavity and dissipates, so it doesn't get recorded, right? But we can use these again to amplify the frequency. Helmholtz resonators. I've got to fast forward a bit to just while I'm on Helmholtz resonators, something which you might be interested in. The Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt, and I didn't know this for a while. In fact, I learned this when I came back from Egypt. So the Great Pyramid of Khufu. So all of these are limestone blocks around the pyramid. So all of this is limestone blocks, right? The central core, what they call the King's Chamber, it's not a tomb, right, but is made of granite, pure red granite, the hardest type of granite. But around the granite is a cavity. Why would you build a pyramid and have a cavity around the central core if you're trying to build a stable structure? By having a cavity, what that essentially does is create a Helmholtz resonator around the quartz core. And there's another void there which was detected recently. So, and then you have the shafts coming in from the pyramid. which they say, oh, it's the soul, it's for the soul of the pharaoh. Oh, okay, it's for the soul of the pharaoh, right? But those shafts are a certain dimension. So what that's effectively doing is, incoming waves is going to amplify a specific wavelength, depending on the dimension of the shaft. It hits the granite core, interferes with the Helmholtz resonator, which is the cavity around the granite core, and then it's hitting granite. Now, granite contains quartz. I think I've got the wrong slide here. So bear that in mind, just keep that in mind. Now, you might know quartz is piezoelectric. So when you apply mechanical stress to quartz, it generates electrical currents. So technically speaking, the pyramid is amplifying waves to direct them to a Helmholtz resonator around the so-called King's Chamber, which is a granite core. Granite contains quartz, and if you have such a resonance around the granite, it's going to create electrical charge. It's known as the piezoelectric effect. And vice versa, if you apply electrical charge to the quartz would oscillate, and that's used in phones, it's used in all computers. A computer cannot work without a quartz. Most people don't know this. A computer cannot work without a quartz crystal. In every computer, next to the processor, is a quartz crystal. And electrical current is applied to the quartz crystal to give it a specific vibration to maintain the clock speed of the computer. And so it works two ways. If you apply electrical current to quartz, it oscillates it. But if you apply oscillation to the quartz, it generates electrical charge. So I think that's what's going on in the pyramid. And again, it links to the science of the seance, where, you know, if you go to the pyramids in Egypt, there's no hieroglyphs in them. There's absolutely no hieroglyphs. If you go to the Valley of the Kings, where there's actually tombs of pharaohs, there's hieroglyphs everywhere. There's murals. There's protection spells around the sarcophagus, so you know they are burial tombs. There's not one hieroglyph in the pyramid, so they cannot be burial tombs. So we've got to rule out that they are burial tombs, for one. So you rule out that, and then you find these structures such as the quartz, the granite, the Helmholtz resonator, the fact that they've left a cavity around. So there must be some sort of function which they served in the ancient world. Just touch upon that. Again, it links Helmholtz resonators and those things. And then getting back to the golden ratio, the lovely thing which you all know about the pentagram. Why do witches have pentagrams, and it's so demonized, but the pentagram contains the golden ratio in all of it. Multiple instances of the golden ratio. If people don't know the golden ratio, it's expressed in nature, the petals of flowers, the snail spiral. Greeks used it in architecture. But if you divide the red line by the green line, you get 1.618. If you divide the blue line by the magenta line, 1.618. It's essentially 1 plus to the square root of 5 divided by 2, you get the golden ratio. So basically, if you divide any part of the pentagram with the other smaller part, you get the golden ratio. So when we use the pentagram, again, getting into the science of the seance, we've got the idea of making tones with rhythm and rhyme. So it's making intelligent waveforms within the noise. But then we use incense, and even the church uses incense, frankincense, so there's the component of smell. But then we have geometry, so we have the room dimensions with room modes, but then we have, if you have 5 candles in a pentagram, that's creating physical intelligence within geometric noise. If you've got a lot of geometric, just random natural outcrops and stuff, but then you make 5 candles in a perfect pentagram, you do a mantra with perfect tones, not necessarily perfect, you make rhymes and patterns. The important thing is rhymes and patterns, whether it's Christian, witchcraft, witchcraft, or Hindu, Sanskrit, right? And the important thing is making the patterns within the noise. Just like I say, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, we're looking for patterns in noise. So the pentagram and other key sort of geometry is good at doing that. I say it's commonly known that if you want to invoke archangels, you go to north, south, east, west, the cardinal points, and then you might want to make a pentagram of candles. And again, the light itself is also waves. So sound is waves, light's waves. So that's another part of it. So the pentagram is very important. And if anybody's interested in pentagrams and Pythagorean tuning, there's an old Disney film called Donald Duck in Math Magic Land. I'd really recommend it. If you haven't seen it, there's a thing called Donald Duck in Math Magic Land. I'd recommend it. So he goes into Pythagoras, the tuning of the Pythagorean pentatonic scale, the secret society of Pythagoras, where they had the handshake, the brotherhood, into the buildings. And you think, why did they do all that? Okay, they're doing it, but why are they doing it? They must have known that, okay, we're amplifying the frequencies, we're working with nature itself, we're working with the unit, because when you're working with the pentagram and the divine ratios, you are amplifying the universe itself. You're amplifying, you're having sympathetic resonance with creation itself. You're having sympathetic resonance with it. again, sympathetic resonance is, again, if I match the frequency of the wood, you can collapse the wood, but you're not essentially collapsing it with the universe. You can't collapse the universe, right? You're resonating with the universe. So by having these frequencies, again, Donald Duck in Math Magic Land, but again, Greek temples with the golden ratio, and they made all that stuff. So that's the core of that stuff. And then again, sympathetic resonance. People know if you get a tuning fork, 440 hertz, the fork next to it will just start resonating because it's sympathetic resonance. You don't have to actually touch the fork, you just start again. So if there's something in the spiritual realm, etc., which is we're all in the same frequency range, golden ratio, so you start seeing the resonance or experiencing the resonance. Pyramid again. So now we're going to get into just a few extra supplementary slides. So regarding the science of the seance, we've got extrasensory perception, so psychic dreams, precognition, which is sensing the future, and then clairvoyance and remote sensing, which is sensing something which is happening at the same time in a remote location. Now the studies, I'll post a link to this in the group afterwards, but this is the Parapsychological Association and the Society for Psychical Research Convention 2008, page 216. New insights into the links between ESP, extrasensory perception, and geomagnetic activity. Now this is not the only study which goes into this, and what they find is, when there's, let's say, solar storms from the sun, they interact with the planet's the geomagnetic field. I'll give a quote here. So here, ESP was found to succeed only during periods of enhanced pulsation activity within the 0.2 to 0.5 hertz band, but ESP effect was absent during the most disturbed periods of activity in the 0.25 to 0.1 hertz band. Now, this is just with this study, and they're only analysing a specific frequency range, but what it's essentially saying is there's an electromagnetic field component to ESP. When the field is so disturbed, it's creating a lot of noise, so it's hard to do ESP. We're getting less incidents of clairvoyance when there's a lot of solar storms going on, which are interacting with the planet's electromagnetic field. It creates noise, because if I'm talking out and everybody's going, rah, 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 you can't hear me, I can't hear you, it's essentially the same. So if the planet itself is creating so much electromagnetic noise from the solar storms, it dampens the ESP, but at the same time, if it activates it slightly, if it's slightly energized, we get increased ESP. Now, what's interesting about this study and other studies, I've just got one here for example, there's other studies where they've took this data retroactively. So they've looked at sunspot cycles going back, let's say, 1,000 years, and they've correlated it with ESP studies going back to like the Victorian era. Okay, let's look at this ESP study. How good was the ESP there? How many sunspots were here at this location? At this time, and they were able to retroactively correlate sunspot activity, which correlates with geomagnetic storms, and incidents of ESP. And again, there's going into the two types of ESP, whether it's precognitive, looking into the future, and clairvoyant, seeing things at the same time but in a remote location. It seems that they are affected differently. So the field can affect them differently, essentially. So when one might get dampened, the other might get enhanced by that activity. But again, it just shows that when there's too much activity, when it's aggressive pulsation, it's really hard to do ESP. Now, this can be good if we want to do proper working, if you want to do dream working, etc. We've got solar forecasts these days. We've got instruments looking at the sun. NASA SDO, solar dynamic design. We know when these solar storms are coming. So you think, okay, let's get ready for it. Then we know there's going to be an increased field. Then that would be a good time to do ESP dream work. If we know there's going to be a G5 storm, it's going to be very hard to do that. But as that starts to settle, we get an increase of ESP. So when there's a big storm, as it settles, we get an increase of ESP. But if it's a minor storm, again, we get an increase of ESP. So this can be good using solar forecasts, the science of the seance, looking at geomagnetic storms, look at NOAA.org, NASA SDO. We can forecast this and then use it to our advantage in Dreamwork and ESP. And then we have the Ministry of Defence, remote viewing, MOD, and we've got the link to here. So this is from a Freedom of Information request. You can find this on National Archives, MOD, and this is remote viewing. You might know about the one the CIA does. So the American CIA got a bunch of people, stood them for remote viewing. That was in the 80s. This one was conducted in 2001. And the reason they do this is because it's a national security issue. If you can have a psychic medium say, I know what's in Area 51, and you can just imagine what's down there, that's a national security issue. So they were genuinely seeing, is this real? Can these people really see what's in our deep underground bases? They see these experiments, what we're doing, these chimeras and these things that look like aliens but aren't really aliens. Let's see if they can do it. Anyway, So the one in 2001 by the MOD, what they were doing is, I'm just going to give a brief summary. What they were doing, you can see I'll give a link to in the group, you can see the total freedom of information, a lot of black ink you can see. What they were essentially doing, they got a lot of mediums who were self-purported mediums, because, you know, by having this, they wanted people who was really good mediums, so they got a group of mediums. And what they did, they had not only EEG, EKG, so they had the brain hooked up to brainwave machines, right, to scan the brainwaves, but they also had local field monitors. They were monitoring the local electromagnetic field within the room while they were doing these ESP experiments. And if you look at the overall outcome, they would say, well, you know, it's kind of 50-50, inconclusive. But if you look at every page of this document, some of these mediums are pretty freaking over the target. Like, some of these mediums were good mediums, but a lot of them were kind of just, they weren't really getting the target. But putting all that data together, they report, you know, there's nothing really, not much to see here, a bit of a 50-50, but some of the mediums were really over the target. And bear in mind, they were monitoring the local field of electromagnetic waves as well as the brainwaves. And then we get into Appendix G. So Appendix G on this page is completely blanked out, you can see. It's just Appendix G it's just complete black, redacted. But if you scroll more through the document, we got a bit of information on Appendix G. So Appendix G says the design, construction and testing of then it's redacted. So what we see here, the MOD had target generation procedure for remote viewing, initial email inquiries, instrumentation configuration, so they were calibrating the machines to monitor the frequencies in the environment, then a concept of paranormal activity including remote viewing, and then again Appendix F is interesting, expertise in blank in psychoenergetic perception of remote viewing, right? So blank, just putting it out here, there's only one word that fits in that, is drugs, right? I'm just saying, because a lot of these mediums do say they use psychedelics, which helps, so you can put that word in there. But then Appendix G says the design, construction and testing of a blank, blank, blank. So what we're left here with is, what can we ascertain what they were doing with Appendix G is, what I conclude is they've either got they've designed a machine to block out ESP because it's a national security risk if you can see what's going on in Area 51, or they've got a machine to enhance ESP, because all of this experiment was not only to look at remote viewing, but what frequencies are involved, what disturbances of the local field, not just the brainwaves but the local field. So they've gathered all that information and then they've used it for Appendix G. So the whole point of this was for Appendix G. And the fact that all of Appendix G is blanked out, right? All of it's blanked out. If you go into the document, it's just complete black. Whereas we can read all of the other documents. So for the MOD to say, it's a bit of a hit and miss, a bit of a 50-50 flip a coin, okay, then show us Appendix G. Why can't you show us Appendix G? What are we doing there? And not only was it not 50-50, you look at some of, like, as they read the actual whole document, some of the mediums were over the target completely. You can see as well, they knew what was over the target. But that's just another part of the science of the science. Like, even the MOD are looking into not just remote viewing, but the frequencies involved, and they are designing some sort of instruments to do something with it, whether it's blocking ESP or enhancing ESP. That's the whole point of those 2001 experiments. One last thing now, Columbus clouds, is it? You might hear about like rain dances, and there's a story I think I mentioned before, the Druids. There's a story because we've got no written records, but the ancient Druids of Britain were said to be able to generate thunderstorms. You ever hear of that? So if there was some invading, if they knew somebody was going to invade up the roads, let's make a thunderstorm, lads, come on, make it so that all the boats will get messed up. No, we have. This is just basic, so a bit of advanced. So for clouds to form, you have condensation nuclei. You need particles, either dirt particles or smoke particles. So this is the expression of. Oh no, sorry. This is a different thing. Sorry, I've gone. I'm going to get to that one first. Then I'll get to that one first. So this is the evidence of the cloud lifetime effects from wildfire-induced thunderstorms. Yeah, read that again. The evidence of the cloud lifetime effect from wildfire-induced thunderstorms. So certain types of wildfires, burning those certain trees and plants, is going to induce thunderstorms, and it extends the lifetime of condensation nuclei. So the Druids probably knew this, that if you burn a certain type of plant, or you set a certain forest on fire, it's going to create thunderstorms. We know this now. Certain wildfires in Canada, some of them create rain, but some of them create thunderstorms. I'll put this in the group. So that's from Atmospheric Science, 2008. And there's loads of these studies on wildfires and how they affect precipitation. But this one in particular is about thunderstorms. So like you can have a specific, and this is going to create thunderstorms, just fact, because of the type of what it extends the lifetime of the condensation nuclei, and the longer it's up there, it's get ionized and create a thunderstorm. Whereas if it's not a long life, it's going to rain, right? So that's that. So again, the science of the seance, the rain dances were real. It's not so much that you're dancing, it's that you're burning something. You're burning something, and depending on what you're burning, is going to create either rain or thunder, over there or over there. So that's that. And then we have 2 more slides, sorry, and then I'm done. The expression of non-conscious knowledge via ideomotor action. So this is getting into Ouija boards. So they've got a control group without a Ouija board, and they have a group with Ouija board. And they basically ask them questions which they have no knowledge about, just really, So what they find is, again, this is a repeatable experiment. You might, again, if you're skeptic, can't believe it, just look into it. Look into the study. So the question examined here is whether ideomotor actions, ideomotor, the Ouija board with the glass, ideomotor actions, can also express non-conscious knowledge. We investigated this via the use of implicit long-term semantic memory, which is not available to conscious recall. We compared accuracy of answers to yes-no questions using both volitional report and ideomotor response, Ouija board response. So when they say ideomotor, I mean Ouija board. Results show that when participants believe they knew the answer, responses in the 2 modalities were similar. But when they believed they were guessing, accuracy was the chance of volitional report, 50%. But significantly higher for Ouija response, 65%. So when they gave the people the Ouija board, whether it's the subconscious mind or unconscious mind, they were just getting answers more correct somehow. Whether it's a spirit aiding them or whether they call it here the unconscious mind. But just the fact that it's gone from 50-50 sort of flip a coin answer to this is 65%, that's pretty significant. I mean, with most studies, if it's a 10% increase, this is a 15% increase. So that's expression of non-conscious knowledge about ideomotor actions, conscious cognition 2012. And I'll put some similar articles here, a review of contemporary ideomotor theory. There's all sorts of related articles. That's that. I think I've got one more. Just one more. So, and then I get into REM rebound. So going back to extrasensory perception and dreams, so a lot of ESP can work in the dream world. In fact, it happens a lot in the dream world because we have sensory deprivation in the dream world. When we are dreaming, we're no longer seeing the light of this reality. We're no longer hearing the audio of this reality. We're bound to a wider universe. So we can pick up things. If you have a sensory deprivation tank, you can't see, you can't hear, you're floating, right? So when you're dreaming, you're essentially in a separate sensory deprivation tank. Now, REM sleep is where we have a lot of dreams, right? And REM rebound is when you purposely deprive yourself. I'm not recommending this, but again, science of the seance, right? It's how the brain works. If you deprive yourself of sleep for, let's say, 2 days, when you eventually do sleep, because you've deprived yourself of REM, you get what's known as REM rebound, and you have more REM sleep. So you're more likely to have, let's say, precognitions, because you're just getting more dreams. There's some ancients which done this. They used to go to a cave, like Christian mystics, all sorts of people. They used to have sensory deprivation. So what they would do is, fast for 2 days, whatever, go to a cave. They'd be in complete darkness, and they had sensory deprivation. And they'd say they'd have visions. Well, that's essentially REM rebound, because what they're doing, they were getting into a state where they're depriving themselves of sleep. They're having sensory deprivation. The brain's essentially going to sleep while they're standing, or they might go to sleep on the floor in the cave. Then they have a massive spike of REM. Again, other things do this REM rebound are sleep tablets. So if somebody's taking sleep aids, that suppresses REM. So if you stop taking the sleep aids all of a sudden, you're going to get REM rebound. Again, I'm not recommending it. Cannabis also does it. I mean, I don't have it anymore, but as a cannabis user, when I was younger, I used to smoke it every day. And I thought, I want to quit now, I want to quit, right? When you stop, if you're a regular, you get REM rebound. You get a lot of dreams, and everybody would say, I get vivid dreams, everything. But it's the same with sleep medication. It's the same. What's essentially happening is the REM is getting suppressed, rapid eye movement, and then when you suddenly stop taking that substance or sleep medication, or you stop depriving yourself of sleep, you get an increase in REM. So what this is essentially there's a function in the brain that can be exploited, just if you want to. I'm not saying you should, but the mystics used to, put yourself in a cave, sensory deprivation, no sleep for 2 days, and you get visions. There's the scientific method for it, and they say, again, if you link that to the solar storms, if we know when there's going to be some activity, okay, I'm not going to sleep for 2 days, and I'm going to wait for the storm, wait for it to dissipate. There's going to be an increase in geomagnetic activity, plus I'm going to get REM rebound. You're going to get double the effect. There's ways now. Sometimes I'm saying there's science behind. There's things we can exploit, which the ancients exploited, and they didn't have access to rapid eye movement. They just knew what was going on somehow. But yeah, that's basically everything I've got for now. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.